So let's say you're in a global pandemic. You're ready to open up for business again, whatever that means. Your goal is to get back to normalcy while preventing another outbreak that might lead to another lockdown. On January 23, 2020, the Chinese government began to impose travel restrictions on the 11 million citizens of Wuhan, the first city to report cases of COVID-19. After a few days, this would turn into a complete shutdown, with most citizens unable to leave their homes without permission. These restrictions spread quickly to neighboring cities, first through the Hubei province and then across the country. By mid-February, 400 miles away, the 10 million citizens of Hangzhou began their lockdown. The city of Hangzhou is one of China's growing tech centers and houses the headquarters of e-retailer giant Alibaba. It's no surprise then that this city became the first to combat coronavirus through digital means. In epidemiology, one of the best methods to get ahead of a disease is contact tracing. Contact tracing involves talking to people who have the disease and then asking about who they've interacted with and where they've been. Then, you find those people, test for the disease, and repeat the process. Each new case leads to another chain. With the city already beginning to see a spike in coronavirus cases, Hangzhou tried a different method: digital contact tracing. In a joint effort between the state-owned China Electronics Technology Group Corporation and a subsidiary of Alibaba, the health app was developed and distributed. The plan was to create a way to assess an individual's risk of having COVID-19 and provide those with a low risk a way to freely travel, enter shops and businesses, and continue working if necessary. With over 95% of the city having a smartphone, distribution would be as easy as downloading the app. With the health app, residents of Hangzhou would enter their name, address, and national identification number. Next, questionnaires about physical health and recent travel. The app would then display a colored QR code with your status. This color code became a digital ID that would allow you to enter businesses, ride on public transportation, or leave your apartment complex for a walk. They were in 3 colors. A green QR code allowed free movement within the city as long as social distancing procedures were followed. A yellow QR code imposed a 7-day at-home quarantine, and a red QR code meant a 14-day at-home quarantine, including periodic check-ins with health officials, usually through telemedicine systems. Hangzhou could slowly begin opening for business. State News reported that by February 24, 2020, over 50 million people in Hangzhou and the surrounding province had signed up for the Health Code app, reaching over 90% of the population. Of those, 98.2% were green. However, this also meant that almost 1 million citizens had a yellow or red code. The system spread throughout China, and by the beginning of March 2020, over 200 cities had a version of the QR color code in place. Eventually, leaders in Beijing began to unify the systems, creating a national program to combine the data and standardize the codes. China would begin to open up while mitigating risk. Now, you may be thinking, how is demographic information in a questionnaire enough to determine someone's risk at spreading coronavirus? I mean, there are some easy enough ways. Positive testing citizens could have their status linked to their national ID number, and anyone living around them would have their code changed based on how close they were. If you had a fever and said so in the app, you'd get a restrictive color code, and maybe those in the same home as you would as well. This still couldn't be everything. What other data did the government have to use in their algorithm, especially with enough certainty to risk lives? And what happens if your status changes suddenly and you have no idea why? I'm going to be very clear here that the methods I'm going to talk about are partly based on government standards and partly based on conjecture and observations from those on the ground. The algorithm behind the status QR codes is a bit of a black box. We only know some of the pieces that go into the calculations, but educated guesses can help with the rest. The Chinese government's mass surveillance system on their own population isn't new. Over 400 million CCTV cameras are in place across the country. State media has said that this is the largest surveillance system in the world using facial recognition technology, body temperature scans, and big data analysis. Tracking the movement of individuals along with potential contacts would be a prime use of the system. Combined with GPS to track cell phones and QR code scans around the city, officials could have a pretty good idea about whose status needs to change. As part of the national rollout, government officials have said that additionally, passenger manifests from trains and airplanes were being used. For example, on a plane, all passengers within 3 rows of an infected person would have their code switched to red due to close contact. The rest of the plane might be switched to yellow because of being in the confined space with someone who is contagious. This starts to explain why some people's statuses might change day to day. The system doesn't tell you why it changed, all it does is show you the new color. With the only way to appeal through the app, there's little recourse for someone that has had their movement completely shut down from one day to the next. Cities in China are beginning to see success with the program. Wuhan, after being locked down for months, began allowing travel outside the province on April 8, 2020, but only those with green codes. Human rights groups worry that the status codes could be used to keep others at home under the guise of public safety. The Chinese government has been accused of shutting down political opposition, and a red code could keep someone home for any reason. With social media posts about COVID-19 and other recent events disappearing, not everyone thinks the government will be honest about how they use the system. It also isn't clear what information is being sent to central databases and what stays on the phone. The use of QR codes to track movement and provide information to the police isn't new either. In far west China, the minority Uyghur people have had QR codes with personal information and legal statuses posted on their houses for police use back as far as September 2018. Few actually know what China is doing with the massive amount of data. However, it's becoming clear that the system is working, and some sense of normalcy is returning to the cities. Is the invasion of privacy and increase in state surveillance worth the return to normalcy? Countries like South Korea and Singapore have had success with digital measures, raising many of the same privacy concerns. In the US, Apple and Google recently announced a voluntary system that would use Bluetooth proximity to alert users to close contact with infected individuals. The WHO, CDC, and other medical organizations have said that one of the conditions of coming out of lockdown is the ability to conduct monitoring of confirmed cases and contacts. In a country as large as China, or even the United States, there aren't enough health workers to do the contact tracing at this point. More options are needed. China took their first step. Will they be worth it in the end?